Okay, today we are going to learn about our final type of proofs, which is when we are going to use CPCTC. So just remember that reference sheet should be out. Reasons triangles are congruent are these big bad. Reasons sides are congruent only come from the green box. Reasons angles are congruent only come from the blue box. And then parts being congruent is only going to come from the pink box. This is only once you have congruent triangles. So if we don't have congruent triangles, we're not going to the pink box. So here, we're actually going to be using our congruent triangles. So we're focusing on CPTC. This stands for corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. We use it when asked to prove parts are congruent. So if we are asked to prove two parts of a triangle are congruent to each other, we are going to use CPCTC. But first, you must prove that the triangles are congruent. If we don't have congruent triangles, we cannot do this. So our triangles must be congruent, which means in my statements, I need to have congruent triangles before I can use CPCTC. So looking at our first proof, we have all of our statements given to us. Our first two are from our given, so that's always how we start our proofs, given and given. Our last box is always what we are trying to prove. And if you notice this time, it does not have a triangle symbol. It has an angle symbol. So we are trying to prove that two parts are congruent. Because an angle congruent to an angle is proving that a part is congruent to a part. Part just means side or angle. Okay, so that is our indication that we are going to use CPCTC. So any time that you see angle congruent to angle or side congruent to side as your last box, you can put this in automatically. Because there's not going to be a question as to what it's going to be. It's going to be CPCTC. We just need to put in the work to get there. Alright, so if we mark up our triangle, we are told that AB is congruent to AD. We are told that BC is congruent to CP. And then the last thing they tell us is AC is congruent to AC, but we need a reason for that. The last side is shared in both triangles, so that would be considered our reflexive property of congruency. Look, we have triangle congruent to triangle, which is our prerequisite, what we need to have happen in order to do CPCTC. So we have that requirement, two triangles congruent. We just need to say why. We're looking at our marks. We have three sides, congruent to three sides. So that's side, side, side. And then because these triangles are congruent, that means by default that these angles have to be congruent. Once their triangles are congruent, everything inside is, which is how we started this year. So these angles have to be congruent because my triangles are. So CPCTC. All right, start out with your given statements. So we are given two statements off the bat. Remember, they go in the very beginning boxes. And your reason is given, which we have our reasons this time. We just have to come up with our statements. Okay, what you're trying to prove always goes in that last box. And remember, if you see part congruent to part, you can automatically put CPCTC in that box. They're going to have to go together if you see part congruent to part. So side congruent to side. Okay, we are told that PS is parallel to QR. So jump on your transversal. That would be transversal QS. Travel from parallel line to transversal. And we get our set of angles. That signal word is parallel. And look, they are using alternate interior angles. So we just need to name them. Trace them out. PSQ congruent to RQS. So PSQ congruent to RQS. Those are alternate interior angles. We're also told in our given statements that angle QPS, so vertex P, and angle SRQ, so vertex R, are congruent, and that was given to us. The next reason I see is reflexive property. And if I look at my picture, my triangles are touching, so they're sharing a side, which means QS is going to be congruent to QS. And then finally, if I look at my marks, I have enough information. I have 3 marks on each triangle, so that's all you need to say these triangles are congruent. If I look at my marks, I have 2 angles and a side. The side's not trapped, so I have angle, angle, side. I just need to name my triangles correctly. So if I name the first triangle, if I name it triangle SPQ, I have to duplicate that order when I name the next one. So I went S, 1 tick mark, or arc mark, P, 2, to Q, no arc marks. So if I redo that, I need to go 1, so Q, to 2, R, so 3 to S. So QRS for my other one. These are triangles. And that is that prerequisite that you must have in order to use CPCTC. 2 triangles congruent to each other. So make sure that's always in the box before you use CPCTC. Okay, this is going to be more similar to kind of the setup. We only have 1 given statement for us this time. It's going to go in that first box. Reason being it is given to us. Our last box is saved for what we're trying to prove, and look, we're trying to prove 2 angles are congruent. Those are 2 parts, so you can automatically put CPCTC in that final box if it's not already there. Right above it should always be 2 triangles are congruent, which they already did for us as well. Okay, we have a signal word in here. We have definition of midpoint. It's the midpoint of 2 segments, so I'm going to need to use it twice. Starting with WY, X is in the middle of WY, which means each side of it should be congruent. WX congruent to XY, that's what they give us. What did I use? I used my midpoint, so I used my definition of midpoint. It's also the midpoint of VZ, which means each side of X on the other segment should be congruent, which means VX should be congruent to XZ. And what did we use? Our signal word of definition of midpoint. Last thing, I have no other signal word, so I gotta look at my picture. My picture can either give me reflexive, the sides are shared, or vertical angles, the lines are intersecting. And here I have vertical angles on each side of X. So trace out those angles so you name them properly. WXV could be one of my angles. And then I could do YXZ for my other angle. So WXV congruent to YXZ. And my reasoning there was vertical angles. They didn't give it to me, I had to put it in there. Notice that X is the same in both. That's what should happen for vertical angles. Or it's actually the same. Looking at my picture, I have 3 marks on each triangle. I have 2 sides and an angle. My angle is tracked between my 2 sides, so I have side, angle, side. Okay, on number 4, we have 2 given statements. They should take up the first 2 boxes. Reason being that they are given to you. And the last box should always be what you are proving. I am proving 2 parts are congruent. So I can automatically, in my final box, put CPCTC because I'm proving 2 parts are congruent. Remember, in the box above, we should be looking for triangle congruent to triangle. So we have to have that before we can use CPCTC. Looking at my statements, I have a signal word. I have bisects. So that's going to tell me I'm using angle bisector. JM bisects angle KJL. So the green angle, which means each side of that angle should be congruent. So let's name them. Trace them out. Angle AJM. AJM congruent to LJM. LJM. Remember, That middle letter should match both that I say when I'm using my definition of angle bisector. So that angle J is used in both, that vertex J is the vertex for both. And that was my signal word definition of angle bisector. They also let us mark angle JMK, so vertex M, and angle JML, so vertex M. That was given to us. I have no other signal words in my statements, but I do see in my picture that my sides are touching. So JM can be congruent to JM. The reason being is because those sides are shared between the two, so reflexive property. And now looking at my triangles, I have 3 marks in both triangles, so I have enough to say that these triangles are congruent. Reason being, angle, side, angle, because I have 2 angles and side track between them. So if I, let me bring this up fast. If I go off of my marks, and I name my first triangle, I'm going to name it JMK. So 1 arc mark, 2 arc marks, and no arc marks. Triangle JMK. That's going to be congruent to retrace that order. So 1 arc mark to 2, JM, to no arc mark, L. So JM, L. Alright, that should be everything for today. Oh no, one more. Alright, we have 2 given statements. They should be in our first 2 boxes. Reason being they are given to us. Let's mark up our triangle. I am told that BC is parallel to EF. That's a signal word. Let's jump on our first transversal. Let's jump on transversal EF. So I'm looking at a signal word here. Parallel line to transversal, parallel line to transversal. So that is angle CBD and angle EFT. That's what they gave us. The type of angles those are alternate interior angles. Let's jump on our other transversal. Travel from parallel line to transversal to get that angle relationship. Parallel line to transversal. We have to name them this time. Those are alternate interior angles, which they told me I would have. We have to name them. So I'm going to name my first one BCD, and then I'll name my second one FED. So BCD congruent to FED. That was an alternate interior angle. My other signal word is midpoint. It tells me D is the midpoint of BF. D is the midpoint of BF, which means each side of D on that segment should be congruent. They told me that too. BD congruent to DF. Reason being, my signal word, so definition of midpoint. I have enough marks on my triangle for me to say that those 2 triangles are congruent. My marks are 2 angles and a side. My side is not tracked, so angle, angle, side. We just have to name our triangles correctly. So triangle, if I do CBD, I traced 2 arc marks to 1 arc mark to no arc mark. So I have to repeat that. I would have to be triangle EFD, 2 to 1 to none. This is the prerequisite that you must have in your box in order for you to prove what we're proving, which is that 2 parts are congruent. Sorry, I didn't tell you to put that in at the very beginning. And remember, you can automatically put in that blank CPCTC anytime that you are ending with 2 parts congruent. Just make sure you have congruent triangles before you say that as your reason. Okay, guys, bring any questions that you have to class tomorrow.